The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 are a duology of turn-based RPGs and part of a long-time running franchise. They were developed by Nihon Falcom and released on September 26, 2013, the first one, and exactly 1 year later on September 25, 2014 in Japan. So today we are going to take a look into 10 things you may not know about these two fantastic titles. Number 10. Last minute changes. The idea and concept of the series began around 2011 when Falcom realized their previous Trails games on the PSP had been well received in Japan. Half a year after the release of Ao no Kiseki in early 2012, Falcom showcased a prototype where the battle system was very different from what it turned out to be at the end. Initially, it was a real-time action RPG where players could only control the main character. Party members were controlled by the AI, but in battle you could switch to any of them at any given time. Apparently this prototype was criticized or wasn't well received because by the end of that very same year, the battle system switched to turn-based. This time they actually added the S-breaks to make battles even more engaging. Less than a year later, the first game was released. I'm glad Falcom changed the battle system as I think it was really good, but it would have been interesting to see this game played as an action RPG instead, just out of curiosity. Number 9. Developed with a free-to-use engine. Well, it seems Falcom took advantage of Sony's new creation, the Fire engine. Its purpose was to create and improve graphics for the PlayStation 3. Initially released on early 2008, with the last version on January 2012, right in the middle of Trails of Cold Steel's development. Falcom adopted this new engine mainly because other game developers had been successfully using it, most notably for games like Disgaea 4, Hyperdimension Neptunia, and the Orlan trilogy. Fire Engine includes a full source code for Windows, and it just so happened to add a new version in 2011, which meant compatibility with the PlayStation Vita. Hence why Trails 1 and 2 were released on both the PS3 and the Vita. It's just funny how such a great series had a start in a totally free engine. Number 8. Drama CD and Manga. Currently there is an ongoing manga based on the first two games, most specifically focusing on the first one. Translated versions of it can be found on several different websites. There's also a drama CD of the second game, which was actually included in the limited edition of it. The cool part of it though is that you can read the script in the Trails of Cold Steel official website under the tab Memoirs. Obviously, it is recommended that you play the first game before reading this one. And just like in the games, it's mostly dialogue, a lot of it between the main characters, almost identical to what happens at the beginning of the second one. Number 7. Commercial failure in the West. Nowadays, and thankfully, the entire Trails arc is very popular, including the two crossbuild games on the PSP that actually never came out of Japan. But at first, Xseed, who localized most of them to North America, didn't do too well. Even though Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 were released on both the PS3 and the PS Vita, even in Europe, the commercial reception was moderate. Criticism was very positive, but the games competed with many other successful RPGs at the time. We gotta consider that it took over 2 years for both games to be localized outside Japan, being released on 2015 and 2016 respectively, near the end of the lifespan of both systems. Well, I'm glad it took a few years for them to become as beloved as they are today, but let's not forget they were initially more like hidden gems. Number 6. The series made Falcom famous worldwide. Nihon Falcom is a very ancient company founded in 1981, almost 40 years ago, godfathers of action RPGs with the East series, and also well awarded for their long time running the Legend of Heroes franchise. But the truth is that even in Japan, they weren't initially as popular, wealthy and successful as they are today. And hell, dare I say, even today they still aren't that much. However, over the course of time, with more and more RPGs being released on their behalf, they became famous at least in Japan. In the West though, most of their East and Trails games were more niche than anything. Well, Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 might have failed initially in the West, but surprisingly they were a major success in Japan from the very beginning. To date, at least the first game has resulted in significant profits for Falcom with almost 2 billion yen in net sales. It was only a matter of time until they started making good money outside Japan. Nowadays, mainly thanks to these two games, Falcom is a worldwide famous company, and it's getting more and more terrain each year. Number 5. Scrapped content. Famous or not, they had a, well, not too big of a budget for these two games. Due to that and some time constraints, there were some scrapped content from the official release. The most notorious one was about the summary between Chapter 6 and the finale of the first game. It was removed from it but later included in the aforementioned drama CD. The town of Ymir also looked almost identical in both games, but with interiors being somewhat unpolished. Ironically, models for Rin's parents have also been found in the Trails archive, meaning they were already done despite not appearing in the first game. Hard to believe this game, considering its length, left a couple of things scrapped, right? But alas, it did, although I don't think it affected the games themselves at all. Number 4. Writers behind the story. One of the reasons these games are famous and beloved nowadays is because the scripts of them are quite bulky. Tons of scenes, dialogue, and character development is what made them so memorable. Credit for this extremely well-written story usually goes for Hisayoshi Takehiri. He focuses more on world building and its lore, which is why we see NPCs with different dialogues after every major event. But in truth, he's not the only guy behind the character development, at least not in these two games. Most RPG scripts are usually handled by one main guy, in this case Takehiri, but worked and developed by a bunch of other writers, and they deserve to be acknowledged. Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 have the following people behind it, and you can see them in the credits of both games. Number 3. The Long Road to Localization. As I mentioned before, the games were released between September 2013 and 14 respectively. It took Xseed over 2 years to properly localize them to North America, and it took even more to the other companies in Europe. The reason being precisely what I talked about in the previous fact. The script of these games was way too long, longer than most JRPGs in existence. They had around 1.45 million characters to be translated. Xseed spent over 1 year to translate the first game until finally releasing it on December 22, 2015. More than 1 year also to translate the second one, adding 11,000 lines of English dialogue, with a release on September 6, 2016. Honestly, my respect goes to Tom Lipschultz and team for doing such a fantastic job. Number 2. The Xseed Controversy. Speaking about Xseed, everybody has already noticed that they didn't localize the third game in the series. Several reasons are behind this, but most of them open for mere speculation. One thing that stands out, however, is an interview from Eurogamer where Falcom president Toshihiro Kondo said he didn't know why Xseed didn't include the dual audio in the series. which means the original releases of Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 on both the PS3 and the PS Vita have only the English voice acting. Upon knowing this, Xseed former producer Tom Lipschultz took it personal and reacted on Twitter by claiming this wasn't true. He said that they had worked really hard to obtain the Japanese audio, but in the end, they couldn't. Why? We don't know. This could be one of the many reasons why Xseed and Falcom parted ways after so many years of working together with previous releases. Number 1. Alisa was going to be the main character. Now, keep in mind that this is just a fan theory, but sustained by a few details in the prototype. I talked about this earlier in this video, but I didn't mention that in the very first 2 demonstrations of it, Falcom showed Alisa as the main character. Rin was nowhere to be seen in this initial project, even when the battle system was changed to turn-based. In both versions, Alisa was the playable main character on what would become the old schoolhouse in the academy. In the final demonstration though, Falcom now showed Rin as the main character and with Alisa being this time only an NPC. Regardless of this being true or not, it makes sense if you think about how much emphasis the writers made on Alisa. To anybody who has played the games, it's no surprise to see that Alisa seems to be the canon romance for Rin. Considering she's not exactly the main heroine, story-wise, as every other female character feels just as important. But some scenes and some of the marketing were very much focusing on her, which leads people to believe, including me, that Alisa might have been the initial idea for a main character in Trails of Cold Steel. Just imagine those games without Rin, or with him not being the protagonist. I'm pretty sure they would have turned out vastly different. Anyway guys, that was my take into the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2, a duology that's literally one big and great game cut in half. If you know any more things about it that I didn't mention, feel free to include them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!